Welcome to another edition of Between the Rows, the podcast of Glacier FarmMedia. I'm your host this week, Gord Gilmour. In this edition, we'll talk to weather expert Bruce Burnett about where this drought ranks in history.
Well, certainly there's a lot of similarities here with the conditions that we've seen in the 30s as well as in the 1980s.
Curtis Rempel of the Canola Council of Canada joins us to tell us why agronomy, not acres, are the answer to growing canola demand.
Once you start tightening up rotations, you sort of start putting an upper limit on your farm.
And we'll be checking in with Manitoba Cattle Producers President Tyler Fulton about the tough decisions his members are making in the face of a crippling drought.
That's typically the last thing that you look to do is cull some of your real productive capacity in your breeding herd. But we are already seeing that.
But first, a word from our sponsor.
Part of being a farmer is being an accountant and a mechanic and a chemist. You have lots on the go. So FarmLink makes your grain marketing go further. We help you reach your financial goals with calculated sales decisions. No bias, just solutions and results. Plus, with our new app GrainFox, we bring every opportunity right to your fingertips. Literally. Start seeing the returns that'll get your family ahead. You've earned it. FarmLink. Your work is worth more. Get started at farmlinksolutions.ca.
Welcome back. In the past couple of weeks, Manitoba livestock auction marts have broken new and unwelcome ground. They've been hosting emergency sales in July, a month that's typically a hiatus for these operations. That's because of a prolonged drought. This is the third season. It's causing producers to reduce their herds dramatically. As producers across the West grapple with low feed supplies, it's weighing heavily on the sector. Tyler Fulton is president of the Manitoba Beef Producers. He joins us now. Tyler, thanks for taking the time to speak with us.
Well, thanks for having me, Gord. I look forward to the opportunity and talking about this situation.
And speaking of this situation, it's not a great one, that's for sure. How are Manitoba's cattle producers holding up during this really stressful time for them?
Well, it's difficult, without a doubt. I see the cattle industry in Manitoba and really across Canada as being just one of the most resourceful and resilient sectors of ag. I'm always amazed at the innovation that I see in addressing emerging situations. But this drought across Western Canada is remarkable and is something that we're going to be dealing with for months and years ahead. And so I'm already seeing obviously producers take proactive measures in order to, first and foremost, look after the animals that are under our care, and and obviously make the appropriate business decisions that are best for them in their own situation.
Now, at times, though, these are going to be some very hard decisions to make. What are the kinds of decisions they're being forced to make? Some must be grappling with the question of whether their operation remains viable after such a prolonged drought. I know that there's been a lot of cattle already culled, and you can cull and you can cull until you start cutting into your main herd. And I understand there've already been some emergency cattle sales. So, what are the things that they're being forced to do now?
That's typically the last thing that you look to do is cull some of your real productive capacity in your breeding herd. But we are already seeing that in particular certain regions of Manitoba that have been the hardest hit. We're seeing breeding stock and pairs go to market simply because there's not the pasture to support them. And producers are making those really tough decisions ahead of knowing that there's really no weather event that's going to solve this in the short term. Producers are looking at any and all alternative feed sources. That includes baling as green feed cereals that are otherwise not going to make a crop that would be economically viable to harvest. And so I think that's a real focus over the few days and weeks ahead.
And speaking of the alternative feed sources, has the situation been made a bit worse by the high grain and forward contract prices? Ordinarily, as you say, you might expect some grain crops to be baled for feed, but I'm hearing that there are such high penalties on the table for grain producers that they're not sure they want to do that, that they're going to have to harvest every bushel that they can just to sort of get out from under those. Are you hearing the same sort of thing? Are there other options for rescue feed, or is this a situation where the cupboard really is just going to be simply bare going into winter or nearly bare?
It's really tough across Western Canada where where there would be any excess supply. So we really are at Manitoba Beef Producers focused on trying to come up with solutions that would allow livestock operations to take advantage, to make use of crops that aren't economically viable to harvest for grain.
What implication is this going to have for the Manitoba and, by extension, Western Canadian cattle herd? You spoke about destocking earlier, and I wonder if this is happening at somewhat unprecedented rates. I know there was at least one emergency cattle sale already in July at a mart that never has a sale in July. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, the sales are being added at several different auction marts now. I know Gladstone is planning to open up. Ashern is also planning or is planning a sale, several sales over the course of the summer, which several of these are just really unprecedented actions, reflecting the fact that we know producers are going to need to sell down their herd. The goal really, from a long-term perspective is to maintain the productive capacity, but really in the context of, $6 and $7 a bushel feed barley and all of the commodity prices being at really high levels, it does make it just increasingly difficult you know, to pencil out keeping animals around.
And unfortunately, there's not a lot of relief in the upcoming forecast, and in all likelihood, we're too late this season anyway. What are the next steps that producers are going to be forced to take? And is there any sign of any kind of help from government?
The next steps are really about taking proactive measures to mitigate, the impact as much as they possibly can. That means approaching your neighbors to ask them about the possibility of taking a crop for green feed. That may also be about securing straw, so that you can use that as roughage in a ration that maybe would use dry distillers grains or a portion of pellets or feed grains. From a longer term point of view, Manitoba Beef Producers is right now active in trying to establish what the best ask is that addresses the situation. And the situation obviously varies pretty significantly across the province, from complete disasters to just exceptional drought that is reducing that's reducing hay and pasture production.
Well, thank you for taking the time to run us through this. I'm sorry it's such a grim situation, and I wish we could have spoke on better conditions.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the opportunity. It's really a critical time right now, and so I really I want to point out the fact that please, all producers, just stay safe and know that we'll get through this as an industry together. It's a tough situation, and the mental stress that goes along with it is taxing. And please just look for support when and if you need that. We know it's a really tough situation, and hopefully together we can make it through.
Yes, thank you, Tyler. As more emergency auctions are held, producers will feel enormous pressure. There's no shame in reaching out for help. which is available in each of the prairie provinces through their respective farm stress lines. You've been listening to Between the Rows, the podcast of Glacier Farm Media. I'm your host this week, Gord Gilmour. Bruce Burnett, Glacier Farm Media's Director of Markets and Weather Information, has been watching this drought very closely. He joins us now to give us some perspective on its scope. Bruce, thanks so much for joining us today.
Good to be here.
So I'm wondering, how does this current period stack up to past hot and dry streaks, like I'm thinking the 30s and the 80s, and in particular the 80s, because I've heard a lot of comparisons.
Well, certainly there's a lot of similarities here with the conditions that we've seen in the 30s as well as in the 1980s. I think all you have to do is to take a look at record temperatures whenever we've come close to them, and they're usually either in the 30s or in the 80s in terms of previous records for any given time. The droughts, though, are different. Every drought is different, and this year is no exception to that. Um, Compared to 1988, the drought onset, or at least the onset of the higher temperatures, has occurred a little bit later. It's hard to realize, given the fact that we saw some record temperatures at the end of June in a lot of areas across the prairies. But in 1988, we were setting a lot of the records in May and early June. So this is a different drought. I would say that it's more extensive than it was in 88. Back in 1988, a large portion of Alberta and even parts of western Saskatchewan missed the really, really dry conditions. This year seems to be almost an equal opportunity drought, where we're covering most of the prairie region with below normal precipitation and above normal temperatures.
So the question I have then is this simply the weather cycle turning as it does, or is this something that's out of the ordinary and should we be concerned about it?
Well, I think again, this is pretty typical of the droughts that we've had on the prairies. That is, the severe droughts. Um, uh, so I don't think that it's something that you can attribute to big, big changes to our climatic pattern here on the prairies. That's going to be something that we'll have to look at probably after this drought is over, and maybe even over the next couple of years here, to see how we respond to it in terms of the weather post 2021. So I think it's a little bit premature to get overly concerned about having a drought of this magnitude. What does concern me, of course, is the record-setting temperatures that we've had in some areas of the prairies, especially across the northern growing areas in late June, and now possibly again next week in July. So something to keep a close eye on. But again, for climatic purposes, I think it'll take a while here to figure out where this drought ranks, and in terms of if this is really an exceptional event.
Well, thanks for taking the time to fill us in on this, Bruce.
Thanks a lot.
That was Bruce Burnett, Glacier Farm Media Director of Markets and Weather Information. You're listening to Between the Rows, the podcast of Glacier Farm Media. I'm your host this week, Gord Gilmour. Next up, we have a special sponsored feature interview on grain marketing, brought to you by Kevin Yaworski with Mark Lepp of FarmLink.
I'm Kevin Yaworski of Glacier Farm Media, and I'm joined here today by Mark Lepp of FarmLink to talk to us about the fundamentals of grain marketing. Hi, Mark. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Kevin. Thank you for having me.
So, Mark, let's start with the basics. How do you define grain marketing?
Well, grain marketing isn't an entirely new idea, but we recognize that many producers might not be aware of what exactly it is and what the advantages to developing a customized grain marketing strategy for their farm. Simply put, grain marketing is a technical art of selling grain. Grain marketing is really a series of informed decisions and subsequent actions that turn grain into profit. It really considers two main factors, the market analysis and marketing decisions, and puts you as a producer in control of your grain.
What should growers then be thinking about when setting up a grain marketing plan?
Well, with any grain marketing plan, there are really five key elements to grain marketing. Number one being analyze the markets. It's really important to gather unbiased market information from credible sources to make smart grain marketing decisions. Monitor those market decisions, or sorry, monitor the market conditions to make a sale when pricing is strong. So that's number one, to analyze the markets. The second key component of the five would be to manage the risk. Choose the crops with the greatest income potential, recognizing that you have to do that within your crop rotation opportunities, and also when you're looking at those crops, understand the risks associated with growing that crop, both agronomically from an agronomic perspective, but also understand the risk from each of that crop in a portfolio approach as far as market volatility within those crops. So the third part of the five elements of grain marketing would be to understand your position. Know where you're at. By that I mean, calculate what your benchmark sales prices are, have an understanding of where you stand as the market changes within your portfolio of crops, and where your profitability numbers are, and then out of that will come what your target prices are to achieve those goals of your operation. The fourth one would be, to use your strategies and tools. So once you've identified, from point three, understand what your position is. Once you have identified what your break-even prices are and your targets are for your grain marketing, you can develop marketing strategies that work within your goals and your preferences. So by that I mean some strategies like grain contracts, forward selling strategies, grain storage strategies, and then also futures markets to hedge as well. Then the last component of that, with those five key elements, would be set timelines and evaluate. To take a look at your goal breakdowns, and always take a look annually, look back and see what happened since you made your grain marketing plan, and what changed, what didn't change, and reflect on areas that are areas for improvement. Always continue to review your plan and adapt it as required, because the markets change very quickly. A marketing plan is really only as good as the day it's written, but once you have those five key components, it's very easy to adjust and to reflect and to evaluate, to adjust that plan to make sure that it's the best for your farm.
Who are the players in a grain marketing plan?
Well, there are really four main players when it comes to grain marketing: producers, advisors and analysts, buyers, grain buyers, and then also storage and transportation.
So, Mark, I know we've briefly talked about it on previous episodes, but now FarmLink is adding a new fundamental to grain marketing, and that's GrainFox. Can you tell me more about this new app?
Yeah, I'd love to. GrainFox is modern grain marketing. It's grain marketing technology. It's a tool that uses FarmLink's market analysis, which is backed by a team of analysts. We have a network of local grain marketing advisors and 20 years of statistical and historical data. So what it does, it gives producers, three main things: financial power. So it allows you to see to know what you have, what it's worth, combined with the strategies of when to sell, and most importantly, why. It has a key feature of automation with a human touch. As producers are in control of production, but we're here to help navigate when to sell. And probably one of the most important things is, unbiased advisor support on demand. Producers can get a quick second opinion whenever they need it to sell with confidence. So some of the really neat things that we have coming up, features that are coming here in the next, before the end of the year, would be a local price mapper. So as a producer, you can have great insights on what the local cash prices are in your area at your fingertips. We're creating a comprehensive grain management system, so that we can. There's a lot of great technology on the production side, and really what we're providing with our grain management system is, what do we do from the bin to the bag? Keeping track of all sales, and adding budgeting and benchmarking component, cash flow requirements, And when I back to what are the key elements to a grain marketing plan, we're really adding all this into GrainFox. And we're using machine learning to enhance analysis, make recommendations, use that to help with predictive sales recommendations, price trends, market forecasters, and simply put, it's a smart grain marketing recommendations based on farm business profile.
Wow, thanks for that overview. So how can producers then try GrainFox?
Well, it works on a desktop and a mobile when you download the GrainFox app from the Apple Store or Google Play Store. You can visit our website at farmlinksolutions.ca, and you can try GrainFox for free for 90 days.
Thank you very much, Mark. That was a great overview there, and we appreciate you coming on to Between the Rows.
Thank you very much.
That was a special sponsored feature brought to you by FarmLink. I'm Gord Gilmour, and you're listening to Between the Rows. Canada's canola crushers are on an expansion tear. They're set to dramatically grow Canada's domestic processing capacity in the next few years. It's causing some concern that farmers may skimp on rotation to meet the new demand. But Canola Council of Canada Vice President of Crop Production and Innovation, Curtis Rempel, says there's plenty of room to increase production intensity. He joins us now. Curtis, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you, Gord. It's my pleasure to be here.
So, with all the new canola crushing capacity set to come on stream, it seems likely that crop production will have to increase. Do we know anything about what the scale of the increase is that we're talking about?
We do. The Canola Council strategic plan, Keep It Coming, was designed exactly to address that. There were projections for increased crush capacity, and then there were projections for yield increases based on global demand forecasts for how much canola oil would be required, say by 2025. So our strategic plan goes to 2025. And basically the global demand was sort of pegged at 26 million metric tons, which translates to 52 bushels an acre, which is roughly what would be needed to allow for our crush capacity to be realized optimally on the prairies then with the plant expansions that have been announced.
So it sounds to me like you're expecting that increase to largely come from productivity rather than acreage expansion. I have, however, heard some people expressing concern it may come in the form of tighter rotations. Is that something that you guys worry about?
It's definitely, top of mind, and maybe I'll just go back to the initial piece. You're right. We are looking at yield intensification as our strategy and not acre expansion. There aren't that many more acres of farmland, and there's probably some acre expansion in some pockets of the brown soil zones, et cetera. But mostly we're looking at yield intensification. Typically, if once you start tightening up rotations, you sort of start putting an upper limit on your farm then, because you do have this, a potential for buildup for disease, inoculum, insect, pest, eggs, those types of things. You know the story. When you start tightening rotations, then the ability for pests to start building up at some point in time starts limiting yields as well.
So it sounds to me like you want them to be aware that some of these tighter rotations can actually be counterproductive in the long run. Is that a fair assessment?
That is a fair assessment. Yeah. Everything has the ability to just be compounded a bit more.
What are some of the things that they can count on in terms of meeting this increased goal of increased production without taking that road?
The genetic yield potential of all of the hybrids varieties that growers have access to from all of our life science companies. In almost all of the canola producing ecozones, they definitely have the genetic yield potential to sort of hit that 52 bushels an acre, and probably even more, like 55, 60, even potentially in the brown soil zones, certainly in the blacks, gray wooded. There's the life science companies have done a remarkable job of delivering yield potential. And So then I think it's become agronomy to maximize yield. We've put the agronomy practices into 4 buckets: stand establishment, integrated pest management, fertility management, and harvest management. And we've looked at yield gains like 2 bushels from one, 3 bushels from the other, just by sort of trying to optimize the agronomy in those buckets that are part of the canola plant development cycle during the year.
Is there some lag time with producers kind of recognizing just how good the genetic potential of these crops has become? Is agronomy catching up to genetics? Is my question.
Agronomy is catching up to genetics, and I think a lot of that is based on the great research that the value chain and the grower groups, especially the provincial grower groups, fund. And there's a lot of public-private partnership research that's ongoing between academic institutions, Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada, and our grower groups and industry. And so I think we kind of know where the innovation gaps are, and the agronomy gaps are, and we're plugging them. And then the other piece is growers are working with equipment that's designed for large seeds like corn, cereals, soybean, etc., and adapting a small seeded crop. And the equipment manufacturers have really been stepping to the plate in the last number of years because they recognize the opportunity as well.
This expansion, it seems like it's been one plant after another announced either for construction or expansion. And when you have something that's growing that quickly, the question that immediately comes up is there some risk that crush could outstrip supply? But it seems to me that you're pretty optimistic that the goal is attainable, that the industry will rise to the challenge, and that these plants will be supplied.
I'm optimistic, and I'll reiterate again why my optimism. The genetic yield potential is there. We kind of know the agronomy gaps that we've had to address and are addressing to help growers get there. And then we can't control for the weather. Some better weather prediction might be useful as well. But I think we know what the tool, we know we have the genetics, we know what we need to do, and I believe we can.
Well, that's great. Thanks a lot, Curtis.
My pleasure.
That was the Canola Council of Canada's Curtis Rempel. That's another edition of Between the Rows. I'm your host this week, Gord Gilmour, saying so long, and hopefully we'll soon see some rain.
Part of being a farmer is being an accountant, and a mechanic, and a chemist. You have lots on the go. So FarmLink makes your grain marketing go further. We help you reach your financial goals with calculated sales decisions. No bias, just solutions and results. Plus, with our new app GrainFox, we bring every opportunity right to your fingertips. Literally. Start seeing the returns that'll get your family ahead. You've earned it. FarmLink. Your work is worth more. Get started at farmlinksolutions.ca.